Alright, so learning that I need to hone my whittling knives is probably the biggest thing I wish I learned sooner. Just learning how to use a leather strop to save me a bunch of time and frustration while whittling, while preventing me from having to take the tool back to a sharpening stone again. But one of my favorite reasons to use a strop is that there isn't any setup to use. Once you have the compound on it, just pick it up and go. So what do you need for a leather strop? The basic supplies you need to hone your knives are just a strop and honing compound. For the sake of the video, we're just going to use this Beavercraft strop from their knife kits and the green wax compound it comes with. The process is similar with other types of kits and strops as well, but I feel like this is more representative of what most beginners will come across for the first time. You can either use the smoother side of the leather or the rough side. The end result will be similar, but the smoother side will look nicer while the rough side is actually easier to apply the compound to. But we'll go over this here in a little bit later. Now if you have limited access to supplies, there are some other great alternatives to the leather. You can use thick denim like an old pair of jeans, construction paper or cardboard, or even just a flat, smooth piece of wood. There are also tons of different types of compounds available on the market, but they're not all made equal. Even if it's the same color, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same abrasiveness. I personally like to use the wax bars for convenience and cleanliness, but there are also pastes out there available as well that tend to be a little bit more consistent on abrasiveness. And if you don't have any of that, the other option is to use very fine sandpaper like 3000 6000 grit, which works really good in a pinch. The next steps here will depend on if you're applying the compound to the smooth side or the rough side of the leather. So let's go over them both really quick. For the smooth side of the leather, what you're going to need for this is just the leather, the compound, and hopefully a heat source like a heat gun. You can use a stove top, maybe even a really nice hair dryer if it's hot enough. If you don't have a heat source on hand, you can use your fingers to create friction. The first step is to rub the compound on the strop like a crayon, but try to make it as smooth as possible without making any clumps. Then using your heat source, warm up the compound on the leather and smooth it out with your finger a little bit. And then just repeat this until you have the entire leather covered and it's smooth, consistent, and clump free. For the rough side of the leather, all you're going to need is just the strop and the compound. Then all you're going to do is just apply the compound to the rough side of the leather as evenly as possible. And then you're done. Pretty simple, right? Now, a quick tip, if you want to glue the strop to a block of wood, it'll help keep the strop flat and actually make it a lot easier to use. We're going to go over strop maintenance in a little bit here, but for now, let's get on to using your strop. By the way, if you're enjoying the video and getting some value from it, go ahead and hit the like button for me, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask away in the comments. Alright, so one of my most frequently asked questions on the channel is how often should I strop my tools? Personally, I try to make it a point to strop every 20-30 minutes so I'm just carving basswood. If I'm using harder woods, I'll strop more frequently as needed. Sometimes you can forget to stop and strop your tools, but there are indicators that will pop up and remind you that you need to strop your tools here. For example, if you start seeing that the cuts are no longer shiny, but starting to get dull and fuzzy, go ahead and stop and strop. If you start seeing lines or streaks when you slice, go ahead and stop and strop. If you need to take a break and rest your hand for a little bit, might as well stop and strop. And while you're stropping, I personally like to strop each side about 20 to 30 times and rotate every 5 to 10 strokes. It just helps to keep it even. Alright, so the stropping angle and how much pressure to apply to the strop is pretty important, as doing it wrong can round the cutting edge and require you to take the tool to a sharpening stone again to reform the edge. So let's start with the angle. There are two main thoughts and I feel both are fine. The first one is just laying the knife bevel flat to the strop. This is also because many beginner knives have a nice flat grind on them, which makes them really nice and easy to maintain. So just lay the flat surface to the strop and slide the knife along the strop with the cutting edge trailing. The other option is just laying the flat surface of the tool to the strop and lifting up maybe like 3 degrees or something like that. You don't have to be exact, just keep it consistent each time. This can create a micro bevel along the edge, and over time, if done right, it actually does increase edge retention. Now, I am a firm believer in letting the tool do all the work for you. So when you start working with the finer abrasives like honing compound, the amount of pressure you apply doesn't typically result in a better outcome. So in the case of the leather strop, if you apply too much pressure to the surface, the leather will no longer be flat and you'll start to round your edges over time. I found that the best way to use this strop is just resting the blade on the surface, applying even, controlled, but light pressure to the knife, and start stropping. When compared to that of a sharpening stone, strops usually have a much softer surface, and if you start using them the wrong way, you can damage them. So here's a couple of quick tips to prevent damage to your strop. Always strop with the cutting edge trailing, not leading, or you will slice into your strop and cut off chunks. Don't apply too much pressure to the strop or you will wear it out slowly and possibly cause dips or wrinkles over time. Try to keep the strop free of debris, and if you get anything on it, just brush it off with your hand, it'll be fine. And don't store stuff on your strop or it'll start to make indentations and no longer have a flat surface. Alright, so taking care of your strop is super easy to do. You really don't have to do anything for months or even years at a time, especially if you're using a stropping compound in bar form. But here are some things that don't require any maintenance and are actually a normal behavior of the strop.
So dumb.
For example, like your strop changing from a light color to a dark color, this is fine and normal. All it is just the steel coming off your tool. Some of my strops are almost completely black, but they still work great. If you get some debris on the strop, just brush it off your hands first before using it, it'll be fine. If your knife scrapes off a little bit of compound, this is fine. Usually it's just an indicator that you're applying too much pressure to the strop or you're holding the knife at a wrong angle. Now here are some things that will require some maintenance. The most common one is uneven compound across the leather strop itself. You can either apply more compound and smooth it out in the lower spots, or you can remove all the compound and reapply. Another one is the compound's not doing anything or has been on for a long time. This requires years of use to really get to this point, but again, I just remove the compound and reapply. So removing the compound is really super easy to do. I personally just either use a heat gun and a rag or a very durable cleaning rag and just rub off the compound. After I do that, I just put on new compound. Now, if you made it to this point in the video and you tried stropping for what feels like forever and you feel like your knife just isn't sharp enough, go and check out my 5-step sharpening guide. In this video, I go through my entire sharpening process from taking a dull knife and turning it into a nice, sharp whittling machine. Alright, thanks for watching everybody. I hope you have yourselves a good day.